Tchigorin Defence by International Master Andrew Martin, Side 1. The object of this tape is to examine one of the lesser known defences to the Queen's Gambit. This begins with the moves 1, d4, d5, 2, c4, knight c6, and is known as the Tchigorin Defence. It is difficult to understand why this move has never attracted the attention that it deserves. It introduces a system of defence which is active, unusual, and gives considerable creative scope to the interested player. The positions that arise are relatively unexplored compared with the exhaustive analysis devoted to openings like the King's Nimzo Indian. In that sense, it is also an excellent practical choice. Look at diagram 1. With 2 knight c6, black has already stamped his trademark on the game. He plans to assault the white centre with rapid development, and should white advance in the centre, attempting to displace the black pieces, he hopes to construct a blockading position around which he can construct an initiative. Does all of this sound complicated? Well, before we proceed to the analysis, I'll try and break it all down for you into a less complicated form with the help of examples. First of all, let's consider diagram 2.
White. 1, rook, 6. Pawn, 1, pawn, king, 1, bishop, rook, 1. 3, pawn, 1, pawn, 2. Mixed. 2, white pawn, 1, white pawn, black pawn, 1, white pawn. 2, black pawn, 1, black knight, white bishop, 2. Black, 3, pawn, 1, knight, 1, rook. Pawn, pawn, 2, rook, 1, pawn, pawn. 1, king, 6.
This comes from Lasker Tchigorin, Hastings, 1895, and shows a typical light square blockading position for black. White's bishops are ineffective in this structure, and black's excellent knight on d5, well cemented in with his supporting pawns on f5 and c4, is the dominant minor piece. In these positions, there's very little that white can do, and it remains for black to develop his advantage. Ultimately, black transferred his rooks to the king's side. It may look tortuous at this stage, but nevertheless he broke the game open there with his pawns and won comfortably. Diagram 3 is another Tchigorin game. It comes from the game Pillsbury, Tchigorin, St. Petersburg, 1895.
Diagram 3. White, rook, 1, bishop, king, queen, bishop, 1, rook. Pawn, pawn, 4, pawn, pawn. 2, pawn, 2, knight, 2. Mixed. 4, white pawn, 1, black bishop, 1. 2, black pawn, white pawn, 4. Black, 3, pawn, 1, bishop, 2. Pawn, pawn, 1, knight, 1, pawn, pawn, pawn. Rook, 2, king, queen, 2, rook.
You see here one of the key positions in this classic game. In the opening, black has immediately attacked the white centre in order to construct a blockading position. He seized the d5 square and won in beautiful style. If you're wondering how we arrive at this position, the game began 1, d4, d5, 2, c4, knight c6, 3, knight f3, bishop g4, 4, c takes d5, bishop takes f3, 5, d takes c6, bishop takes c6, 6, knight c3, e6, 7, e4, bishop b4, 8, f3, f5, 9, e5, knight e7. And now you'll see we come to the position of the diagram. We'll look at the ideas contained in this opening more closely later on, but the sequel of this game is instructive. It continued 10, a3, bishop a5, 11, bishop c4, bishop d5, 12, queen a4 check, c6, 13, bishop d3, queen b6, 14, bishop c2, queen a6, 15, bishop d1. If black had played 15 b4 instead of bishop d1, if white had played 15 b4, excuse me, black would have played queen to c4, 16, bishop b2, bishop b6 for black, with considerable advantage. After 15 bishop d1, black played 15 bishop c4, emphasising his control of the white squares. White could find nothing better than to play 16 f4, reinforcing his centre, and black castled long. 17 bishop e3 was played, protecting the d-pawn. And now black played one of the key moves in the opening. He brought a knight to d5. Now just stop your tape recorders at this point and have a look how powerful that knight is on d5. The game continued. 18 bishop d2, breaking the pin. Knight b6, embarrassing the white queen. 19 queen c2, and black took the d-pawn off. 19 rook takes d4. After the further 20 rook c1, bishop d3, again embarrassing the white queen. 21 queen b3. Black played 21 knight c4 and was dominating the board. Black won this position very quickly. You can verify this for yourself by just looking at the board how strong black's initiative and advantage is in this position. You will be beginning to see by now the sort of grip that black can achieve if white plays inexactly. So far we've looked at positions in which black achieves dominance on the white squares, but there are some instances of the opposite strategy, black square counterplay. Consider diagram 4. This is a position from analysis which can be considered equal. It arises from the sequence 1 d4 d5, 2 c4 knight c6, 3 knight c3 d takes c4, 4 d5 knight e5, 5 bishop f4 knight g6, 6 bishop g3 e5, 7 e4 knight f6, 8 bishop takes c4, bishop d6. Now what I want you to notice about this position in particular is that black's bishop on d6 is not purely passive. True, at the moment it's protecting the e-pawn, but it does support a possible knight manoeuvre, knight h5 to f4 at some stage, emphasising black's dark square grip. Black might choose to play on the other wing, with for instance knight f6 to d7 to c5, followed by b7 b6 and a7 a5, again cementing the knight in rather similarly to the other examples, but this time on a different colour square. But of course this organisation of counterplay will largely depend on white. At any rate, I consider that this position is equal. Black's chances are certainly no worse than white's. In many of the main lines, black has to surrender the two bishops. We hear a lot these days about the power of these pieces, and in particular how they are better than knights. Is black's concession justifiable? Well, remember what I said about piece pressure early on. Often black finds himself developing so rapidly that he has to surrender bishop for knight at some stage in order to maintain momentum. Given that Tchigorin's defence is all about acquisition of an initiative, this is entirely consistent with black's strategy and can in no way be considered a dubious idea. Don't forget that bishops are not always better than knights. Black will be doing his utmost to ensure that the pawn structure favours knights, or that he has enough activity in compensation for this surrender. Just remember Lasker Tchigorin of diagram 2. White's bishops were useless. A typical sequence from one of the main lines begins 1 d4, d5, 2 c4, knight c6, 3 knight f3, bishop g4, 4 c takes d5, bishop takes f3, 5 g takes f3, queen takes d5, 6 e3, e5, 7 knight c3, bishop b4, 8 bishop d2, bishop takes c3, 9 b takes c3, e takes d4, 10 c takes d4, knight g e7. Now in this position black has given up both bishops, and yet he has considerable compensation in return. As yet white has no real threats, and he will have to think more in terms of long-term consolidation before his central pawn majority can advance. Meanwhile, black will continue to develop as rapidly as possible, creating diversionary and ultimately, hopefully, terminal threats. Let's take play on a little way now. Play might continue. 11 bishop g2, black castles long, 12 white castling short, rook d6 for black, 13 queen b3, in my opinion this move deserves a question mark, and black plays queen h5, reaching the position shown in diagram 5. Now white has made a number of natural moves, but he has not quelled black's initiative at all. Black threatens rook to h6 and a further manoeuvre of a knight to h4. He can always answer any white rook to b1 with b7, b6, and it is difficult to see how white is going to ward off a direct black attack. These moves are not forced, but it is a simple example of how quickly white can get into trouble. Now look at diagram 6. This position arose after the moves 1 d4, d5, 2 c4, knight c6, 3 knight f3, bishop g4, 4 c takes d5, bishop takes f3, 5 g takes f3, queen takes d5, 6 e3, e5, 7 knight c3, bishop b4, 8 bishop d2, bishop takes c3, 9 b pawn takes c3, c takes d4, 10 c takes d4, and black deviates from the last example by playing 10 knight f6 instead of knight g7. Carefully consider the difference before we go on. White plays 11 rook b1, and black initiates a different strategy to the last game by castling short. 11 castles short. Now if white takes the b7 pawn at any stage, knight takes d4 will be a good reply for black, so this is why he doesn't do that for a number of moves. Make sure you understand this before we go on. Play the moves through on your board. White plays 12 bishop e2, he hastens to get castled, and black plays rook f e8. 13 castles short for white, rook a d8, arriving at the position in diagram 6. Now we will follow the game Bisguire J. Littlewood. from Hastings, 1961, which shows very clearly the sort of disaster that can happen when white falls behind in development, such as he has at the moment. But first of all, consider the position carefully. Now you will see that black has attained a perfectly centralised position, but unless he can break through with either a decisive sacrifice in the centre or direct kingside attack, then white has all the long-term chances, because he has some pressure on the queen side, possibilities to displace the black queen from its dominating post on d5 with a move, for instance, like rook b5, and he also has some kingside chances, believe it or not, with a manoeuvre like king g1 to h1 and followed by rook g1. So black must act quickly. As I have pointed out, though, his position is very well centralised, and it's not surprising that he can drum up a dangerous initiative from this position. So let's see what happens when an experienced American grandmaster goes wrong and allows the attacking British player to crash through. White played 14a4. He did this with the intention of playing rook b5 on the next turn, and also in this way he safeguards his a-pawn against capture. Perhaps black was simply threatening to take it off at some stage with queen takes a2. In reply, black played 14 rook to d6. Now, if you look at this carefully, you'll begin to see that the black position is becoming rather ominous. The rook fulfills a number of functions on d6. It protects the knight on c6 against a subsequent capture on b7 and followed by bishop b5 for white. It threatens to swing over to the king side via g6 and h6 after a move by the f6 knight, and will support an attack, a direct attack, by the black queen and knights on the white king. It's now that white makes his decisive error. He played 15 e4. Now presumably he did this because he felt the tactics would work in his favour should black capture on d4. But black is not forced to capture on d4, and you'll see now what happens when white loosens his centre in such a way. First of all, let's see what happened if black captured on d4. He plays 15 queen takes d4. White would then reply 16 bishop f4, a move deserving an exclamation mark. When it's true that black has temporarily won a pawn, but he has nothing better than exchanging queens in this position. Queen takes d1, and white plays bishop takes d1, retaining the two bishops and keeping an attack on two black pawns when the rook on d6 moves, the pawn on b7 and the pawn on c7. With the queens off, black's initiative would considerably diminish. Right, back to diagram 6 now, adding the moves 14a4 with the idea rook b5, rook d6 for black, 15 e4 for white, deserving a question mark, queen h5 for black, deserving an exclamation mark. White continues to lurch forward in the centre. He played 16 d5. Black played 16 knight to d4. White played 17 rook takes b7. And now black played his crushing blow, 17 knight takes e4. Now if at first sight this looks bad, please stop your tape recorders and just have a look. What would happen if white captured the knight on e4? Did you see very simply that the e2 bishop was en prise to both black queen and knight? With knight takes e4, black wrecks the white centre and leaves a path open for his rook to swing across to molest the white king. It's clear that white is already in desperate trouble, and it was so very simple after he had played the loosening move e4. This goes back to what I was saying earlier about long-term consolidation of the white position. White can't be too active too soon. From the position after knight takes e4, white tried to struggle on with bishop f4 on move 18. The object of this is to try and manoeuvre a piece to g3 to somehow protect his king. It's not enough, of course. Black played rook to g6 check. White played bishop g3 on move 19. And black played 19 knight c3, completely devastating the white position. White played the token 20 queen d3. Black captured on e2 with the c knight. Knight c takes e2, and we can consider this to be the end of the story, because in effect what black has won a piece for nothing. Although Bisguier decided to carry on for a few more moves, we can consider that the position is totally lost for him. Finally, there will be situations in which black is fighting against a large centre. The positions that arise in this type of structure will resemble those of Alekhine's defence. These positions will generally force black to play accurately. If white is allowed too much scope for his bishops in combination with a massive advancing central pawn preponderance, the task of the defence will become hopeless. Therefore, let's have a look at diagram 7.
White. 1, king, rook, 1, queen, bishop, 1, rook. Pawn, bishop, pawn, 5. 3, pawn, 1, pawn, 1, pawn. 2, pawn, 1, pawn, 3. Black. 7, knight. 3, pawn, 4. Pawn, 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 knight, queen, pawn, pawn, pawn. Rook, 2, king, rook, 3.
Which comes from the game Taimanov-Spassky, USSR Championship 1960. At first sight, this looks favourable for white. He has an extremely powerful bishop on g2, and his other bishop could become equally powerful in either an attacking role at a3 or a supportive role at e3. White could then look forward to advancing his centre. Black seems at present to have no targets to aim at. Nevertheless, c4 is available for his knight, and with accurate play he succeeds in reaching a balance. The game continued. 13, queen h5. Black protected his knight on a5 by 13 b6. 14 a4 by white. White has obviously decided that he wants his bishop on a3. Black centralises his knight. Knight to d5. White played 15 bishop a3. Black played knight to c4. Note very clearly that black does certainly not want to take the pawn on c3. At present this pawn is restricting the mobility of the white pieces, and I think that if black had captured this pawn he would have soon found himself in hot water on the c-file. He therefore played knight to c4. Now do you see how the knights, in maintaining their central influence, are balancing the long range effect of the bishops in this position? Play continued. 16 rook fc1 for white. c5 by black. (17) queen e2. Should white have captured on c5, black could take on a3 and recapture on c5 with a good pawn structure. He played 17 queen e2, and black captured on a3 immediately. 17 knight takes a3. White played 18 rook takes a3, and I'd like you, before we go on, to just stop and have a look at this position, which in my opinion can be considered equal. Let's go back a bit to diagram 7 and see what would have happened should white have chosen a more critical continuation. White could have tried 13 queen c2, but in that case black will continue to strengthen his position with b6, 14 a4 by white, castles short for black, 15 c4 by white, advancing in the centre. But this turns out not so badly for black, because he can reply 15 knight f5 with the idea of knight h4. As long as black can manoeuvre his knights into good posts, the a5 knight went to c4, and in this case the e7 knight comes out via f5 to an excellent post on h4. Knights in such positions balance out the bishops, and this is why the chances can be considered equal. Well, such are the positional themes running through Tchigorin's defence. You will have seen that it is complex and interesting, but I guarantee that a thorough study of these examples will bring ample reward. The further analysis on this tape is not exhaustive. Rather, it lays down guidelines and gives prospective black players enough information to be able to orientate in unfamiliar positions. Combine the analysis with a study of the examples given on side 1 of this tape. And we'll go on now to the analysis. Part 2 of this tape is concerned with opening variations. It's not possible in 90 minutes to produce an exhaustive survey of this opening. Neither is it particularly profitable. I can only say that study of games and the themes running through the games is far more important in opening preparation than study of moves and variations. Only after understanding of the positions that are generally reached from the opening has been acquired should you proceed to specific move orders. If you don't feel completely confident about some of the ideas already discussed, go back and start again, because you might find the analysis confusing. We can break down the analysis into 3 sections. Section 1 will deal with the most popular white reply after 1 d4 d5 to c4 knight c6, and this is 3 knight f3. It's funny, because although this move has been white's favourite choice in most Tchigorin defence games played at Grandmaster level, it doesn't appear to me, at any rate, to be the best. I certainly feel more comfortable against it than in some of the other lines when I play this opening. Black's policy against this move should be immediate development, aimed against crippling white's pawn structure and preventing him from forming a large pawn centre. I therefore recommend the move 3 bishop g4. Now, what should white play in this position? 4 e3 looks too passive, and black can reply either 4 e6 or, more sharply, 4 e5, 5 d takes e5, d4, reaching a position similar to an Albin counter gambit, in either case with an easy game. Normally, white spies the chance to bring black's queen out into the centre and will play 4 c takes d5. We will treat this as the main line. After 4 c takes d5, black has no choice. 4 queen takes d5, 5 knight c3 is completely unacceptable, and he must put his Tchigorin initiative strategy into practice as quickly as possible with 4 bishop takes f3. The idea behind the immediate exchange of bishop for knight is to attack the white d-pawn with both queen and knight and give white no time for tempo moves like knight c3 hitting the black queen. Therefore, black will recapture on f3 after 4 bishop takes f3 with the g-pawn. If he recapture with the e-pawn after queen takes d5, white's d-pawn is very weak. Therefore, 5 g takes f3 and queen takes d5 for black. White has to do something now about that d-pawn. and he will generally choose 6 e3. Bishop e3 is playable, but only playable. I mean, it's not the sort of most sensible move on the board in this position. So 6 e3, and black continues with 6 e5. White plays knight to c3, and black plays bishop b4. We've seen this sequence in some of the previous examples, but I would recommend you to play through these moves slowly and see how black is developing his initiative. White will generally break the pin with bishop d2, and black captures on c3 with the bishop. Note that we're rapidly reaching a position similar to that of diagram 5. White responds 9 b pawn takes c3. After 9 bishop takes c3, black captures on d4, and again the white d pawn is extremely weak. And after 9b takes c3, black plays e takes d4. Some authorities recommend the move 9 queen d6 in this position, but the game Kasparov-Smyslov in the semi-final World Candidates matches 1984 saw, after queen d6, 10 rook b1, b6, 11 f4, e takes f4, 12 e4, knight ge7, 13 queen f3, castles short for black, 14 bishop takes f4, with some advantage to white. Typical Kasparov play, in particular the moves f4 followed by e4, are typical of his style. Close study of this position reveals that white has 2 bishops and a mobile pawn centre. Black has some chances based upon the looseness of the white queen side, but they shouldn't be enough for full equality. Yeah. We'll go back to diagram 8 now, and black plays e takes d4 instead of queen d6. White plays 10 c takes d4, and black plays knight ge7. Just have a look at this position quickly before we go on. White has several continuations here, but none of them seem to promise him very much. I need only to refer you back to diagram 5 to see how easy it is for him to get into trouble. Black can castle on either side in this position. His knight on e7 is well placed, both to defend and attack from squares like g6, f5 or h4. He has the defensive move b7, b6 available should white attack his b-pawn. And finally, his f-pawn is free to advance, both to cover central squares and to promote an attack. We'll now go on to the study of a couple of specific variations from this position. After 10 knight ge7. White has, I think, 4 options at this point. We'll take them in order. The first option I want to consider is 11 rook b1. This immediately attacks the b-pawn, but black has a choice whether to castle short or long in this position. We'll consider both. Let's say he first of all castles long. White might try 12 queen b3, which at first sight seems to force a queen exchange because there seems to be a terminal threat on b7. But how terminal is that threat? I think a lot of players will be tempted to play queen b3, but in fact the move is not particularly good. Black can allow white to carry out his threat, believe it or not, and play 12 queen takes f3, which in my opinion deserves an exclamation mark. white must go on with this idea. 13 queen takes b7. Black plays a forced move, 13 king d7. And now white has to do something about the rook on h1. He's more or less forced, it seems, to play 14 rook g1. But now black reveals the whole point of his idea. He plays 14 rook b8. And it's, in fact, in this position, white who is losing. Now white has other options after black castles long, but this is an idea of how quickly he can get into trouble if he plays these normal moves. Don't forget too that if he plays too slowly, you might even consider just taking off his a-pawn. Queen takes a2 at some stage. Your passed a-pawn will be a decisive factor in any endgame. Of course you would have to beat off a white attack. So look at diagram 9 now, and you'll see the position after 10 knight ge7. White plays 11 rook b1, and black has another option here, also quite attractive. He can castle short. Now this option promises him a free development, easy play for his rooks in the centre, and a possibility of manoeuvring his knight via g6 and f5 to h4, molesting the white king side. As an example of how white can get into trouble here, very quickly, we examine the move after black castles short, 12 bishop g2. Black centralises, rook a d8, very sensible move. And if white castles short in this position, then black plays a thematic move, rook d6 on move 13. Take a look at it. Look how black's rook is coming to the king side. White could continue 14 f4, hitting the black queen, but he seems to be struck down by rook g6 on move 14. This threatens mate. White has only one defence, 15 f3. And now black plays knight to f5. White can't play e4, this would allow queen takes d4 check, so he tries to get out of the way with 16 king h1. Black plays 16 knight h4. White defends his bishop with 17 rook g1, and in this position I consider that black has the better game. He can even consider a move like b6 and force white to do something about his a-pawn. White's pawn centre is weak, in particular the bishop on d2 is performing a very poor function supporting this weak pawn on e3. Black has rook e8 available, he has moves like queen h5 available. All in all, his position is excellent. One thing I want you to notice about this particular variation was the ease in which black manoeuvred his knight, rook and queen into attacking positions against the white king. Back to diagram 9. We'll consider other options for white at move 11. Option B is rook c1. Now I don't consider this to be particularly dangerous, and in my opinion black can defer castling for one move, although it's possible to castle on the king side or the queen side. Now I think he should simply take off the pawn on a2. Queen takes a2 when white has no counter threat against b7. I don't see why this is not possible. Now black has two passed pawns on the queen side. He can choose to castle on either side depending on circumstances, and white can hack away with 12 bishop c4, but after 12 queen a3 I don't consider that white has any compensation at all for two pawns. 11 rook c1 looks simply bad. Back at diagram 9, we'll consider a further option. White can play 11 bishop g2. Now against 11 bishop g2 I would recommend the immediate long castles. Since white hasn't wasted time on a rook move, the previous variation we examined in which black played castle short rook a d8 to d6 is not working in this line because he's a tempo behind, and white has time to castle short and play f4. Therefore black should try and embarrass the position of the white bishop on g2 by castling short and playing the rook d6 manoeuvre once again, by castling long, excuse me. Therefore, after 11 bishop g2, black castles long. White castles short, and black plays rook d6. Now you can see that this is clearly leading to play similar to the last example. White doesn't play f4 in this position, he plays 13 king h1. Black plays rook to g6, 14 rook to g1. Notice how black's initiative is growing move by move, and that white is having to defend in this position with the two bishops, and he has no time to develop an initiative himself. This is a very important point. After rook g1, black plays queen to d6. White plays 15 rook to c1. Black plays rook h6, threatening mate at h2. White defends with the only move, the only good move, 16 f4. And black plays 16 g5. White plays the only choice available to him, 17 queen g4 check. Black plays f5, exclamation mark. White queen takes g5, and black plays 18 rook g8. Now, by a series of simple moves, black's initiative grew, and white couldn't do anything about it. This is one of the main reasons why I recommend you take up this opening. It's a really excellent practical choice. When you see games like this, you realise just how easy it is for white to go wrong. Back to diagram 9. The final white option I'll consider on this tape is 11 bishop e2. Once again, black has this option of castling short or long. You could try either in your games, but as a contrast to the last variation, we'll consider a short line in which black castles short instead of long. So after bishop e2, we'll try and castle short in this position for black. White 2 castles short. Black plays rook a d8. White tries to remove his king from danger with 13 king h1, and black plays rook f e8. We can stop the analysis here, I think, because the middle game is already in progress. It's not the object of this part of the tape to examine such middle games. Suffice it to say that black is fully developed. He has the same chances of an initiative as he had in all the previous lines. His knight on e7 can come to h4. Other attacking possibilities are rook d6 to h6 as before, and white is precariously placed. At any rate, he'll have to find some pretty exact moves if he wants to develop an initiative, or even to ward off a black attack. We can see from this short analysis that black tends to obtain the better game in most lines because white has such a difficult plan of defence to construct. In my view, it's not a good practical choice, 3 knight f3, if you intend to go down this main line. This particular variation affords black a satisfactory game. Tchigorin defence, side 2. We'll start side 2 right back at the beginning at diagram 1. Can you add the moves, please? 3 knight f3, 3 bishop g4 by black. In the last section of the tape we examined the possibilities after white's c takes d5. Now we'll examine another fourth move by white, queen a4. This is an idea of Alexander Alekhine, world champion for a number of years. His main object is to embarrass the black position with 5 knight e5, and black should therefore prevent this with the move 4 bishop takes f3. There is a choice now of recapture, but in both lines black has a ready-made plan of defence available, giving him a comfortable game. We'll consider first the position after 5 e takes f3. Black should proceed 5 e6, supporting his pawn on d5. White continues to pressurise the pawn with 6 knight c3, and here black puts his idea into practice with 6 knight ge7. This is the position in diagram 10. White has a number of options at this point, but we will consider the most critical tries. Should he play 7 bishop e3, black plays g6. Now stop and look at this position and try and see what black is trying to do. Basically, black's idea is to embarrass the white d-pawn. In this position, I believe that black is actually better, although he must play accurately to prove this. Again, Fuster versus Bronstein, Budapest 1949, continued from this position. 8, c takes d5, e takes d5, 9, bishop to b5, bishop g7, 10 castles for black 2, 11, bishop takes c6, knight takes c6, queen b5 on move 12 for white, attacking 2 black pawns, knight takes d4 for black, threatening this fork at c2 perhaps, and the black queen, and the white queen, excuse me. 13, bishop takes d4, bishop takes d4, rook a d1 on move 14 by white, c6 by black, a move deserving an exclamation mark. 15, queen takes b pawn, and black played queen b6, with, if anything, the slightly better game. In my opinion, the move 7 bishop e3 does not give white any advantage. Go back to diagram 10 and we'll consider a second option. Let's say that white were to attempt to put immediate pressure on the black position with 7 c takes d5, e takes d5, 8 bishop b5. Here black has to modify his plan slightly. He can't really put into effect this g6 bishop g7 manoeuvre. It costs too much time here. White has not wasted a move with bishop e3. What he can do, however, is maintain good chances with the move 8a6, bishop takes c6 check, 9 knight takes c6, 10 castles. If any of you were wondering about 10 queen b3, I think that bishop b4 is a good reply. Therefore 10 castles for white, queen d7, rook e1 check on move 11, bishop e7 for black, 12 queen b3 for white, and black castles long, protecting both pawns. Once again, I think that black has reached a position in which his chances are certainly no worse. It is true that white has some attacking chances on the c-file, but these will take quite a long time to put into effect. Meanwhile, black can attempt to pressurise the white d-pawn and to try and exchange rooks on the d-file, on the e-file. With every exchange, white's attacking chances are lessened. Black could then proceed perhaps to try and exploit his better pawn structure. The recapture 5 e takes f3 seems not to lead to any advantage for white, so we'll consider the alternative recapture 5 g takes f3. Back at diagram 1 please, and the game proceeds. 3 knight f3, bishop g4, 4 queen a4, bishop takes f3, and now 5 g takes f3. In this variation, white is capturing towards the centre. He's trying to build up this big pawn centre we've been speaking of earlier. Once again, I think that black gains a good game by playing the same plan. He plays 5 e6. White plays 6 knight c3, and black plays knight g e7. Consider this position in relation to diagram 10. What are the differences? White has a couple of options at this point. He can play, firstly, c takes d5. Now that white has not got bishop b5 available, I recommend that black captures with the knight, so 7 knight takes d5. White plays 8 e3, and black plays 8 bishop b4. Now it makes less sense to fianchetto in this position with g6 and bishop g7, because white's d-pawn is not isolated and weak as in the previous variation. Therefore black tries to effect a strategy rather similar to lines we have been examining earlier, where white adopts this d4, e3, f3, f2 pawn formation in the centre. He puts immediate pressure on the knight on c3. After bishop b4, white will block with bishop d2, and black castles short. White plays bishop b5. He could play other moves, of course, bishop e2, but then black has a good game. And black captures on c3. Bishop takes c3. B takes c3. Knight b6 on move 11. And black on the next turn will play his queen to d5. Subsequently e5, or perhaps a knight to c4. We can see the ways that his knights are working into the weak white squares, in particular c4, and the queen on d5 will be very powerfully placed. Perhaps then black could consider rook a d8 or rook fe8 followed by e5, things like this. Back at diagram 1, another variation. 3 knight to f3, bishop g4, 4 queen to a4, bishop takes f3, 5 g takes f3, e6, 6 knight to c3, knight g e7, exclamation mark, 7 bishop g5. This attempts to pin both black knights, and is quite an ambitious attempt by white. But black can relieve his position by playing queen to d7 on move 7. White plays 8 e3, and black must play now a6. Stop your tape recorders and take a look at the position after 8 a6 and try and think why this is necessary. Did you see that white perhaps had the threat of c takes d5, e takes d5, bishop b5, embarrassing the black position slightly? The move a6 is an attempt to defuse this plan. Of course white can still do this because the a pawn is pinned against the rook, but after takes on d5, take back with the e pawn, 10 bishop b5, black can play rook b8. Let's see this. 8 a6 is played by black. White plays 9 c takes d5. And now black can either recapture with the e-pawn, as I've just said, or he can play knight takes d5. After knight takes d5, white can continue with 10 bishop b5, but black plays 10 rook b8, 11 bishop takes c6, queen takes c6, 12 queen takes c6 check, b takes c6, and this position can be considered equal. White has some difficulty protecting his b-pawn sensibly. Meanwhile, the black pieces take up active posts. Notice that if white castled long in this position, 13 castles long, black has 13 knight takes c3, b takes c3, 14 bishop to a3 check, and penetrates the 7th rank. The black king finds a secure post on d7, and although black's pawn structure is slightly crippled, his position is very difficult to assault. Black is better in this position. It can therefore be seen that calm logical moves are available to black in this variation after queen a4, and that he suffers no disadvantage in this line. Section 2 of our analysis deals with a second third move option for white. Go back to diagram 1 and add the move 3 knight to c3. This is a more forcing continuation than 3 knight f3, and in my opinion gives black the most difficulties in this opening. There's a lot of theory emanating from 3 d takes c4, 4 d5 or 4 knight f3 from this position, but I suggest on this tape that we bypass these complications and consider the move 3 knight to f6. This is a good choice for two reasons. Firstly, because I think that white won't be expecting this move, it's very rare, and secondly, because I happen to think that it's a good move. There's no direct threat after knight f6, and this gives white a large choice of moves, but here we'll go through the main lines. After 3 knight f6, white has a number of choices. We'll first of all consider 4 c takes d5. Black recaptures on d5 with the knight, and white tries to construct a large centre with 5 e4. Black captures on c3, knight takes c3, white recaptures, b takes c3, and black makes his usual challenge, his stakeout in the centre with 6 e5. White advances 7 d5, and black plays 7 knight b8. Now please, if you think this is a strange move, take a look at this position, and I would refer you to diagram 4. Try to see the similarities here in this position to that of diagram 4. Knight b8 may look strange, but in fact black is instigating some dark square counterplay in this position. After knight to b8, white will generally play 8 knight to f3. This reaches the position shown in diagram 11. Black plays 8 knight d7, protecting his e-pawn, and white continues to try to win it with 9 bishop b5. Black plays 9 bishop d6. White castles short. White did have the option in this point of playing 10 bishop g5 instead of castles, but black seems to obtain a good game by playing 10 f6, 11 bishop e3, castles for black, castles for white, and black brings a knight to c5, 12 knight c5, with, it seems to me, a good game. Back to diagram 11, we'll add the moves 8 knight d7, 9 bishop b5, 9 bishop d6, and instead of bishop g5 I'll move 10 for white, white castles, a more sensible move. Black should castle too, And in the game Ratna-Terpagov, USSR 1950, White continued in this position with 11 Queen to C2. Black played his key move Knight to C5. Look at that knight on C5, it can't be pushed away by a pawn. White has to waste time moving a piece around to exchange it, so that knight will always be very good on C5. White plays 12 bishop E3. Black reinforces his C5 outpost with Queen E7. White plays Rook Fe1. And after 13 A6, once again the chances are balanced. Both sides are developing sensibly. Black has a strong grip on the black squares on the queen side, and he can look forward to slowly preparing the move F5, or to chip away at the white centre with perhaps C6. At any rate, he plans perhaps bishop D7, rook AE8, something like that, and his development goes as easily as white's. Back at diagram 11 now. Instead of knight F3, we'll consider the move 8 F4. Now this move looks fairly dangerous, but on the other hand, Tartakova proved that it's not as dangerous as it looks. Black should take on F4. E takes F4, bishop takes F4 by white, and black plays bishop to C5. Now this bishop on C5 is an extremely strong piece. Frustrates any white attempt to castle at present, and white will have to waste valuable developing time, exchanging this bishop off perhaps. After the further 10 bishop D3, black simply castles, and with the idea of rook E8 he can be adjudged to stand slightly better in this position, due to white's difficulties about castling. We can say that the immediate F4, expanding in the centre, is not dangerous. 4c takes d5, in my opinion, is not a particularly good move. After 6 e5, 7 d5, black has the square c5 in his hands and is quite happy. His methods of assaulting the centre lead to equality. Back to diagram 1 now, please. Adding the moves 3 knight c3, 3 knight f6. Another option for white at this point is to play a typical Queen's Gambit move, 4 bishop g5. In this position, black should take immediate action. 4 knight e4. White plays 5 c takes d5. Black plays knight takes c3. 6 b takes c3. And black brings his queen to a dominating position in the centre. 6 queen takes d5. Now the danger about positions like these is that black attains a dominating central position fairly quickly, but perhaps it's too soon, because often he can find himself pushed back from the centre and his pieces are driven further and further back until he runs out of space. These are the dangers for black. Positions like this depend on exact timing. After queen takes d5, white will play 7 knight to f3, and black should play the move 7 bishop f5, reaching the position in diagram 12. The move bishop f5 is an attempt by black to restrain white from expanding in the centre. White might continue from this position. 8 queen b3, bishop e4 by black, interesting idea. 9 queen takes d5. Just have a look at this position. White could have played 9 queen takes b7, after which black would reveal the point of his idea by playing knight takes d4, leading to an unclear position. Instead, 9 queen takes d5, bishop takes d5, 10 knight d2, White's trying to get in e4. Black plays 10 f6, bishop h4, e5, 12 e4. Both sides seem to be carrying through their plans logically. 12 bishop f7, 13 d5, 13 knight b8, again heading for the square c5. White reinforces his centre by f3, and now black can play either knight d7 or c6 with a balanced position. Analysis in this particular line is not exhaustive, but the move knight e4 gives black an active game. Back at diagram 12, black had another option on move 7. Instead of bishop f5, put the bishop back on c8, he might have tried knight a5. Now this is a sharp attempt to grab the white squares. Watson, in his book on Tchigorin's defence, printed by Batsford, recommends this move. But I think that 8 bishop f4 with the idea of knight d2 and f3 should give white the edge. Maybe you'd like to examine this for yourselves. 4 bishop g5 should be answered by 4 knight e4. After 4 knight e4, black has good fighting chances. We'll go back once more to diagram 1. Please add the moves once more. 3 knight c3, knight f6, and a further option for white at this point is 4 knight to f3. Now I consider that this very natural developing move gives black the most problems in this position. White is trying to play a normal queen's gambit with a black knight on c6, which is in general not a good square for this piece when black plays an idea with e6 in normal queen's gambit style. Once black has committed his knights to f6 and c6, he must continue in aggressive style. This is why I'm recommending a sharp variation on this tape. Black should play after knight f3, I think, the move 4 bishop g4. Let's say white now tries to embarrass black by playing 5 c takes d5, knight takes d5, e4, 6 knight takes c3, b takes c3, and you should be by now reaching for that e-pawn with alacrity. 7 e5, 8 d5, knight b8. Now this position has distinct similarities to diagram 11, but it's not quite the same, because black has already committed his bishop from c8 to g4. This gives white the opportunity to grab what I think is an advantage with 9 queen to b3. Now readers should be happy with the further analysis, because I consider that black should sacrifice a pawn in this position. It's the only position on the tape in which I'm recommending black to sacrifice something. I think that black should play the move knight d7 in this position, and after a capture, 10 queen takes b7, black captures on f3, crippling white's pawn structure. 11 g takes f3, bishop d6, 12 bishop b5, black castles. Now what, you might ask, does black have for a pawn in this position? Well, once again he has excellent control over the black squares. He threatens perhaps knight c5 and queen to f6. Perhaps he threatens knight rook b8 in this position. Perhaps knight c5 and f5. White's best might actually be to trade off on d7, eliminating that knight once and for all, with 13 bishop takes d7, queen takes d7. But the white queen is out of play for some moves. Black has the move f5, very aggressive, perhaps in conjunction with queen f3. He can play one or other of his rooks to the b file. And all in all, I consider that he has some compensation for the pawn. Note that black's king, of course, is in total safety on g8, whereas the white king still has to find a safe home. I would suggest that if listeners are not happy with this particular position, they should investigate another variation after 4 knight f3, where black plays d takes c4, the analysis of which it is beyond the scope of this tape to encompass. In general, the strategies of 3 knight f6 after 3 knight c3 are still experimental. I recommend that you supplement this tape with further preparation from opening handbooks, in particular with regard to this line. But before you do so, have another closer look at this position. Make sure you familiarise yourself with the attacking potential in the black position. The final part of this analysis section deals with the other third moves for white. In general, black obtains a comfortable game without too much difficulty against these continuations. We'll go back to diagram 1, and the first thing I want to consider is the move 3e3. I think that 3e3 is too passive in this particular position, and that black should become active immediately with the very logical 3e5. Now this leads to a type of French defence reversed position, but black has an opportunity here if white now plays 4d takes e5. After 4d takes e5, black should play 4d4. We'll follow the game now. Reti against Bogulyubov, Kiel, 1921, to illustrate how black drums up chances from this position. As there seems to be a threat of bishop b4 check, bishop d2 takes on e3 exclamation mark, white has to do something about this annoying pawn on d4, therefore he takes it. 5e takes d4, queen takes d4. Does that appear paradoxical to you? Well, I can only say that after knight takes d4, perhaps knight c3 followed by bishop e3 is good for white. Therefore queen takes d4 on move 5, queen takes d4 on move 6, 4. White, knight takes queen on d4 for black, bishop d3 on move 7 to prevent the fork on c2, and black plays a very interesting move, 7 bishop g4, trying to provoke weaknesses in the white position. Reti is duly provoked. He played 8 f3, black retreated 8 bishop e6, and after 9 bishop e3, castles long by black, we can see the ease with which black is completing his development. After the further 10 bishop takes d4, rook takes d4, black was in possession of the 2 bishops, an excellent active game, and chances to regain his pawn. His pressure along the d file fully compensates for the pawn disadvantage. Back at diagram 1, please add the move 3e3, e5, and another option for white at this point is to play 4 knight f3, supporting his centre rather than the immediate advance. Black should be under no pressure whatsoever in this variation, and plays for immediate equality with the move e takes d4, 5 knight takes d4, knight takes d4, 6 queen takes d4, knight f6. This position is equal. Both sides' pieces are coming out as quickly as each other. A further option for white on move 3 should be seen in the position of diagram 1, adding the move c takes d5. In general, no problem for black again because he's tempoing on the white centre all the time. So therefore 3 queen takes d5 is played, and now white has to choose between the ways in which he can support his centre. We reach now the final diagram position, diagram 13. White plays in this position 4e3, and black, by now you should have played this move automatically, hits the white centre immediately with e5. White plays 5 knight c3, bishop b4 for black, bishop d2 breaking the pin, 6 bishop takes c3. Again, by now you should be seeing the way in which white is recapturing on c3. B takes c3 with the b pawn. E takes d4 for black. 8 c takes d4 for white. Knight f6 for black. And we're reaching position similar to the other lines, but in this particular position, white doesn't have double pawns. Black therefore has to be more careful in his choice of strategy. Let's say white tries to get rid of the black queen from d5. He plays 9 knight e2. Black castles. 10 knight f4 is played. 10 queen d6, and white plays 11 bishop d3. Well, I can only end my analysis here by saying that a rich middle game is in prospect. It's beyond the scope of the tape once again to go too deeply into the middle games arising from this sort of position, but once again black's development is fairly easy. He can consider bishop g4, perhaps positioning his rooks in the centre. He can even consider in this position fianchettoing his queen's bishop by b6 and bishop b7. In general, because of the difficulty white has in freeing the bishop on d2 or improving its scope, then we can say that this position too gives equal chances. Back to diagram 13 now, please. And in this position, white plays 4 knight f3 instead of 4 e3. This too is a supportive move, and white leaves the position open for his bishop on c1 to come into the game. But once again, energetic measures by black maintain a balance. Black should play e5. White plays 5 knight c3. He could have snapped off the pawn on e5 with 5d takes e5, but after queen takes d1 check, 6 king takes d1, bishop g4, black obtains a typical development advantage and a great pressure for the pawn. In general, black regains this pawn and equality results in most variations. Therefore, white plays 5 knight c3, and by now you should be getting the idea. Bishop b4. 6 bishop d2 is played, renewing the threat against the black queen. 6 bishop takes c3, and now in this position where white hasn't had to play e3, he can recapture on c3 with the bishop. Look at this position carefully before we go on. What do you think black should play? Did you find the move 7e4? I hope so, because it's a very good move here. White must retreat his knight to d2. He could go to e5, but in general he doesn't want to do that. Black plays knight to f6, and we'll stop once again here after the move 9e3 by saying that black should have a good game if he just castles. Perhaps bishop c4 by white, queen to d6, and black supports his centre with bishop to f5 and rooks to the middle of the board, rook a d8, rook f e8, in both cases with comfortable development. But that's all we're looking for from an opening, isn't it? Comfortable development. We're not looking for immediate wins. Let's face it, you don't get immediate wins with any opening if your opponent plays sensibly. We're just looking for good ways to bring our pieces into the game, to prepare a good middle game position. I believe that in most lines, Tchigorin defence does this. In all lines, it gives black a satisfactory game. We've reached the end of our analysis together, and as a final postscript, I'll append a classic game from this variation, which I hope will stimulate you to play the variation yourself. We're going to look at the game Teichmann versus Tchigorin, Cambridge Springs, 1904. If this doesn't inspire you to take up the opening, then nothing will. So set your pieces up in the starting position and we'll begin. 1 d4, d5, 2 c4, knight c6, 3 knight f3, bishop g4, 4 c takes d5, bishop takes f3, f5, d takes c6, bishop takes c6, 6 knight c3, preparing to establish a strong centre, 6 e6, 7 bishop f4, looks like a safe move, but it doesn't do anything to contest the central white squares. 7 knight f6, 8 e3, bishop b4. Look at the way that black is devoting his entire game to the pressure on the central white squares. 9 queen b3, knight d5 for black, 10 bishop g3, castles for black. Already black has a very satisfactory game. The ease with which he completes his development testifies to this. Bishop d3 on move 11 by white. Bishop e2 might have been better. 11 queen g5, 12 queen to c2, f5 by black on move 12. Now I recommend you stop at this point and try and see if you understand the ideas behind the move f5. Once again, black is consolidating his grip on the central light squares. It doesn't matter that he concedes a couple of irrelevant black squares in the centre, because white doesn't have any initiative on the king side to use these black squares with. We'll see what happens. Let's say white occupied the centre square, bishop e5, as he did. 13 bishop e5, black played rook f7, and white castled long, obviously hoping to do something on the king side later on. He was immediately frustrated. Black played 14 bishop takes c3, b takes c3, and b5. Now please pay close attention to this strategy by black. He has prevented the two key thrusts that white might have had to liberate his position, c4 and e4, and can proceed to attack the weakened queen side without any fear of counterplay. In fact, the black attack comes crashing in now. Please pay close attention to it. White played 16 rook hg1, and black transferred his queen to white's queen side immediately by playing queen e7. Now such lightning switches of front are typical in a position in which one side or other has a big advantage. In this position, black simply has more squares, more relevant squares for his queen, therefore he can afford to play this queen e7, this scissor manoeuvre to the other side of the board as quickly as possible. So queen e7. Now what does white do about it? He tries to prepare haven for his king by playing rook df1. Queen a3 check by black. 18 king d2, and black gets on with his initiative by playing 18 b4. White played 19 c4, and black continued his assault with 19 bishop a4. Now obviously white has to do something about his a pawn, he can't let that drop for nothing, so queen b1 is forced on move 20, and black brings his knight in with tempo. 20 knight c3. Queen a1 is forced, but what a horrible square for the queen to have to go to. 21 queen a1. Black's initiative appeared as if by magic, didn't it? And black brought the reserves up with rook d8, with veiled threats along the d file and a threat of c5. White played 22 g3. Already he's out of constructive moves. Black checked on e4, knight e4 check. 23 king e2 was played, and black played 23 knight c5. Now obviously a capture on c5 leads to instant carnage after queen takes d3. Therefore white tries to shore up his already horrible position by playing 24 queen b1. Knight takes d3, 25 queen takes d3. Queen takes a2 check. 26 king to f3. Bishop to c2. And white resigned in view of 27 queen d2. Bishop e4 check, uncovering an attack against the white queen. White's reply is forced. King e2. Black plays 28 bishop f3 check. Now of course if 29 king takes f3, queen takes d2 wins immediately. Therefore 29 king e1 and black checks on the back rank, forcing mate. That was an excellent game by Tchigorin and a model of attack, and gives a clear indication of the sort of things you can get from this opening if white doesn't know what he's doing, or even if he does. So we've reached the end now. I hope you've enjoyed the tape. I hope you're stimulated to play the opening, and whatever your results, I wish you good luck.